There's something about vlogging that gives it this super unique feeling compared to any other type of video out there. It's like this intimacy that you don't feel on anything else. One of the questions that I get all the time is, how do I make a cinematic vlog? Or how do I make my vlogs more cinematic? So in this video, I want to give you some tips that you can use not only to make vlogs, but also to make those vlogs more cinematic. So secure the cup, let's get into it, and while we're at it, let's go try and find a lighthouse. First things first, let's give a little bit of context here. What are we actually talking about when we say a cinematic vlog? Vlogs are generally thought of as self-shot, self-directed, and self-edited videos about something that's going on for that person. It basically feels like just a little peek into what's going on in their life. And part of that intimate feeling that we were talking about before in vlogs comes from the fact that usually the person in the video will break the fourth wall and directly address the audience by talking straight at the camera. It's basically as if they were talking to someone else that was on the journey with them. Now, this is a very loose interpretation of what a vlog is, because there are vlogs out there where the person on camera was just the talent, or maybe they filmed it but they didn't necessarily edit it. But the main super important part is that direct feeling of connection between the audience and the person on screen. And then of course there's that other word in there, cinematic. My understanding of what most people are getting at when they're talking about cinematic is just more like a movie and less like a slap-together home movie. So my idea of a cinematic vlog would be to take the professional feeling, professional quality, and storytelling of your typical cinema or movies and mix it with that slice of life feeling and intimacy that you get from a typical vlog. And the first thing that we need to consider when we're mixing these two together is style. Now, it's likely that you've already got some kind of idea of this in your head, even if you haven't actively thought about it, but it is important to know the style of the video that you're going to make before you do pretty much anything else. For example, what mood are you trying to put across to the viewer? Is it supposed to be funny, dramatic, calming, moody, epic, scary even? I think a lot of people think of cinematic as being dramatic and epic all the time, but that's really only a small piece of what you can do with the story, and it's often not even the best way to tell your story. I often like to tell people to think like an editor, but when you're in this part of the process, try to think like every single person in the pipeline of making a video. So you're the producer, the director, the camera operator, the editor, and the audience as well. And you want to make sure that everyone in that pipeline is all on the same page as to what kind of style this video is trying to get across. What feeling are you trying to create with the video? But before you even hop in and start filling any of those roles, we need to start with some planning. Now, planning might seem kind of like a counterintuitive thing for vlogging, because a lot of the great vlogs that are out there kind of feel like things are just unfolding naturally and the creator is just there to document them. But those vlogs would be really boring if those creators didn't know just how to nudge things in the right direction, to know what to capture and how and when to put it together. Now, there are definitely some creators out there who can do this on the fly, but usually that comes with a ton of experience, or if they just happen to be some kind of genius vlogger storyteller person. So unless you think you're one of those people, one of the best places to start is with a little bit of planning, and that starts with figuring out what you think the story will be. One of my favorite simple storytelling vlog foundations is something that I like to call thing to do, idea to say. Basically, this means that the vlog is going to go through some kind of action or journey, something that you're going to physically do on camera. And then underneath that, there's going to be some kind of idea, and that's going to be the thing that you can talk about while you're showing on screen what you're doing. And that idea is going to give more context and more purpose for the things that you're seeing on the screen. Let's say, for example, this video was more of a vlog and less of an educational video. One of the ideas that I could have attached to us going to a lighthouse is the fact that that photo that was up on the wall was one of the first photos that I took when we moved to Vancouver Island, and one of my favorite photos. So the idea of going on this trip would be to, let's say, try and recreate that feeling of creating another photo that I really love. The idea doesn't have to be anything too crazy, but if your first thought was to say, I'm gonna go do this thing just because it'll be fun, maybe try and go a little bit deeper than that. Usually it's there and it's not too hard to find. Beyond that, there are a million storytelling tactics that you can learn as you go, but I definitely recommend keeping it simple to start with. So take a very simple idea of where you think the beginning, middle, and end of your story will be, and just either write it down or kind of internalize it. Then once you have this down, if you want, you can start to loosely plan some of the shots that you might want to get along the way. If you could anticipate everything that was going to happen, what shots might you want to get? Then of course, depending on what the activity is that you're doing, you're going to have to be flexible and kind of adjust as you go. And the more you do this, the easier it gets. Now, for everybody's favorite part, let's talk about the gear that can help take you from a regular old vlog to a more professional looking cinematic vlog. We can officially see the lighthouse now. You just got to do a little hike to get down there. All right, kicking things off with the camera, the one that I'm shooting on right now and the one that I've been shooting on a lot lately is the Panasonic Lumix S5 IIX, and it's a really great setup for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's an interchangeable lens camera, so I've got lots of options for the lenses that I can put on this depending on what I need. It's also got a full frame sensor, so that gives me the ability to do shallow depth of field or blurry background, as well as good low light capability. It's got solid stabilization and autofocus, which are very important when you're filming quickly and filming by yourself. And it's got a flip screen so I can see what I'm doing when I'm setting up my shot. And in the grand scheme of things, it's a really great value for the functionality and image quality that you get out of this camera. Of course, you can shoot a vlog on any kind of camera, but using a camera like this, where it's got all of those features and that professional quality, is going to take it up to give you that more cinematic look, provided that you are willing to learn how to use it properly. As far as lenses go, I'm a big fan of a 16-35 for vlogging style things. That's what I've been filming this whole video on so far. While it's not the hugest range of focal lengths, I do find that it gives me the most for what I need in these kinds of situations. And one really important thing about having a 16-35 or any kind of ultra wide lens like this is that you don't have to go too far from your camera. So if you're nervous about leaving your camera set up while you're vlogging, this will give you the option to stay a little bit closer. And staying closer to the camera also has the ability to give us better audio. And speaking of audio, the next important piece of gear is a microphone. An on-camera microphone is a solid choice for the most part, as long as you're going to be close enough to the camera when you're doing your dialogue or your speaking bits. But if you want to be able to move away from the camera a little bit, you might want to look into some kind of a wireless system. Lately, I've been using the Rode Wireless Pro a lot. I can just clip it to my jacket or something like that, and it actually records internally. So I can clip that on, hit record, and run as far away from the camera as I want to because the microphone is literally coming with me. And this gives me the ability to leave the microphone set up on top of the camera, so I've got dual audio for whichever one sounds better in that instance. Which is kind of funny today because I haven't been far enough away from the camera to actually need it. Next up, your best friend when you're filming yourself is going to be a tripod. Some people like to use those little mini tripods that you can hold at the end of your arm for that kind of vlogging look. Or if you go with a more full-size tripod, you'll have a little bit more versatility in the shots that you can get while you're out and about. I personally like to try and find carbon fiber travel tripods, ones that are made to be small and light, but ideally that still go high enough that I can get this kind of eye-level shot when I need to. The one I'm using right now is the Ulanzi 0Y, and it is absolutely fantastic. It's the smallest and lightest that goes the tallest that I've found so far. And lastly, for gear, if you want complete control over your image and your exposure, you're gonna want some ND filters. ND filters just make things darker so that you don't have to compensate with things like your shutter speed and your aperture that'll actually change how the image looks. There are two main types of ND filters. There are variable ones and solid ones. Variable NDs are really handy when you're out shooting, you're not sure the situation you're going to be in, and you have to change settings quickly. The alternative, of course, is solid NDs, and generally they have better quality and they don't have the problem of cross-polarization, but they are more cumbersome to switch when you need to switch quickly. Regardless, you want to make sure that you're getting high-quality ND filters so you're not ruining your image quality before it even makes it into the camera. I use a mix of variable and solid NDs depending on which situation I'm in, but I probably lean more on variable NDs because when I'm out in a place like this, I never know what's going to happen with the light and I want to be able to adjust quickly. So now that we've figured out our style, we've done some planning, and we figured out what gear we need, we're ready to go film. And the way that we film can have a huge impact on how our video turns out. Yeah, I'm sure it doesn't seem like it'll be too big of a deal, but I should have checked ahead of time. Thank you so much. Okay, fine. So, as it turns out, there is a sign on the fence of the grounds for the lighthouse that says it closes at 4. So I just got kicked out because it's 4:05 and they were closing up. So the lady was really nice. She let me get a couple of shots right down at the lighthouse. But here we are. We're not going to let that stop us. Let's talk about filming. One of the most important things that you can do when you pick up your camera is to film with intention. It may feel like you should just be filming all the time, but before you hit record, try to think about what's going to help to tell the story. That being said, there is some give and take if you're in a situation where things are unfolding quickly, or if you're not 100% sure how the story is going to go. So as you go along, you'll learn to find a balance between being too restrictive about what you're shooting and also going too far the other way to what we call spray and pray. One part of intentional filming is trying to create interesting and visually pleasing compositions. If you just hold the camera up at your face and always shoot from the same position, it's gonna get pretty boring pretty quickly. So experiment with some different angles, low angles, high angles, Dutch angles, which is when it's kind of tilted a little bit. Try a bunch of different stuff and see what sticks for you. You can also try to add depth to your shot by creating layers in your composition. This can be done by pulling your subject away from the background a little bit or tilting them on an angle so that you get a long leading line that draws your eye towards them. But you can also do this by adding something in the foreground as well that might be totally blurred out, but it adds another layer of depth. And then within those interesting and visually pleasing compositions, we want to make sure that we get a nice balance of different types of shots. So talking about wide or medium or close-up shots, it's nice to have a variety of those so that you can stitch them together in the edit and make things a little bit more interesting than the same shot over and over again. And when it makes sense, it's nice to get multiple views of the same action so that you can cut between them, and it just adds that little bit of extra dynamic to make things more interesting. Of course, that does mean that you have to do the same action a couple of times, but it can totally be worth it when it cuts together all nicely. And there goes the sun. Another kind of balance that you need to keep in mind while you're filming is the balance between show and tell. If all you do the entire time is just show what's going on around you, it may be missing a piece of context, and it definitely won't have that human connection unless it is filmed and put together in a masterful kind of way. And vice versa, if all you do is sit and talk to the camera, it can get pretty boring and lack the visual intricacies of a really great video unless the person sitting in front of that camera is a fantastic storyteller. It's going to depend a lot on what kind of video you're making. For example, this is a much more educational video than a typical kind of vlog would be, so there's a lot more talking going on here. But if we flipped what was important so that the lighthouse took priority over the information, then I definitely would have wanted to show a lot more and talk a lot less. There is no perfect ratio here. This is going to take some practice, and you're going to want to find what works best for you. Now, if you struggle to know what to say on camera, try this out for your vlogs. When you're talking to the camera before you do something, try to focus on why you're doing it and even think about what kind of problems you might have while you're doing it. I don't know, let's say like, you gotta get to the lighthouse before it closes. Try to focus on the why and the conflict more so than just talking about what you're going to do. This will keep the viewer interested in whether you're gonna succeed or not, or give them an emotional connection to the thing that you're doing in the first place. Then talk to the camera again after you're done whatever it is that you're doing, and do a bit of a recap of everything that happened up to that point. The best part about this is that you can use it as a voiceover over some of the parts during the vlog. And of course, if something happens in the middle that I think is worth saying, I can definitely record that. I will also record it in my afterwards recap as well, just in case. You never know which one might be the more useful one for you in the edit. I may have missed my shot to get sunset at the lighthouse, but I found this pull-off that's still pretty fantastic. When you're editing, you want to make sure that you're keeping the main goal in mind. What is the story that you're trying to tell and that feeling that you're trying to get across? This should literally be your thesis, your guide to tell you what to keep and how to implement it. Everyone's process for editing is different, but I highly recommend that you try editing in passes. What I mean by this is make a big cut down to start with, and then go back, make notes, make more cuts, and start to whittle down until you have just the parts that serve the story. And while you're in the editing process, if there's something that you happen to be missing, there's generally a way to try and kind of fill in the blanks. You can use voiceovers to try and add context, you can use stock footage to try and fill in visuals, or you can go and reshoot some things if you were missing them, provided that you don't have to travel too far to try and go get them again. In my experience, 90% of the time there is a way to make things work. Of course, there are compromises that might need to happen, but there's generally a way to get it over that finish line. Another important part of post-production is color grading, and it can definitely help you to stand out amongst other videos, but if it's not something that you're super comfortable with, I would recommend that you just try to build up the basic skills to match your shots throughout your video so that it looks consistent and it's not distracting. Audio is another part of the editing process that is super important in your videos. In general, you want to have a basic understanding of how to increase and decrease volumes of certain clips or certain tracks. And then if you want to get into equalization and compression, that can definitely help to take you to the next level for audio. And then at the very end, you want to ask yourself, did the outcome fit what you had in mind when you started? And if it doesn't, ask yourself why. Go back and analyze your own work, analyze the influences that you picked when you were going into this, and see if there's a way that you can improve. And then of course, probably the most important thing that you can do at this point is go make another one, because the best thing that you can do to get better at this process is do it again and again and again and just get that that practice in. I've left a bunch of links down in the description to gear and some other things that might help you with your vlogs, so make sure to go check that out. Huge thank you to Panasonic for sponsoring this video. Huge thank you to you for watching, and I'll see you next time, hopefully with more Lighthouse.